I'm Suzanne. I am a writer, an author, and a teacher.
Hello, I'm Michael. I am a sommelier, tarot card reader, and former ballerina. And this is All the Woo.
T for Tarot.
Yay. As always, this is a safe space where you can join us in a non-judgmental place where we are just really sharing our own experiences and knowledge on these topics, and really, at the very least, hope you're entertained.
What's the wine, Michael?
So today I'm picking Cristom Mount Jefferson Pinot Noir. This is coming from the Eola Amity, which is in the Willamette, I need to say that right, the Willamette area of Oregon. And I'm picking this because Cristom overall, they have had and have utilized the tarot card of the Seven of Pentacles in there. I actually have a t-shirt from them that has this, and I was like, yes, give me that, please. It spoke to me. Which actually makes sense because it has to do with kind of watching, like taking a break and waiting for what you have planted to grow.
Awesome. It doesn't really seem like there's any point in asking how is tarot woo. It's just almost the most woo thing that we can do in the modern world, I think.
Pretty close, yeah. At least that people are familiar with.
So I'm sure Michael knows this backwards and forwards, but because it's the one thing that I'm aware of in this, the tarot cards were actually first sort of identified as tarot cards in about the 1450s in Italy. And they were originally just a different form of playing card. And if you watch the fabulous but probably not very much loved DaVinci's Demons, in one of the first episodes, one of the main characters has the original tarot cards from that time.
Interesting.
He's really cute too. That just helps. It's a brilliant show. Anyway, so I think most of us have grown up with a concept of tarots being almost a gateway, a portal, if you will, into the world of woo. But when you actually look at them, they're not, that mysterious. But I think that's the beauty is, like a lot of things woo, they look almost ordinary on the surface. And then once you have the wisdom and the perspective and can see beneath the illusion, then you can see what's really there.
I think tarot kind of falls into my wheelhouse. And in case you haven't put it all together, I have a tendency to be drawn to things that not a lot of people know about, mostly because I don't like for things to be a mystery. I think tarot falls into that realm. Like we were saying, it's something that seems like you should be pretty straightforward. But unless you have taken the time to become fluent in the language and the symbolism that is in the cards, then chances are you're not going to know what those cards mean or know. I feel like people, if you were to give them a deck of tarot cards, they kind of be like, and if they don't know, then they would just hold them and be like, I don't know what to do with this, right?
And I would say that even as someone who does use tarot cards, but not obviously professionally, that there is a degree of understanding of just like any language. Like, okay, I can order a beer and I can go to the bathroom.
Yes.
But I cannot have a philosophical conversation in this language.
Yes, exactly. And I think that a lot of people will just kind of be like, I don't know. But I also think that there's a lot of misunderstanding. People either, like you were saying, a portal, but not necessarily understanding how that portal operates. As an example, I had a deck of tarot cards that before I really started to take the time to utilize them and really do readings in that way, that it was an ex-boyfriend of mine who, just because I had them, I wasn't even using them or doing anything like that, that he's like, you're a witch. And I'm like, first of all, that doesn't make me a witch. And also, how is that? I don't see how all those things go together right now.
And I'm thinking that is such embedded, especially Northern European mentality, because, originally math was considered witchcraft, which, you could argue. But but things where there was ciphering in any way was considered to be witchcraft. Let's look at what percentage of the population was illiterate and who controlled who read what. This was before the Gutenberg and all that. But it feels almost like that he was drawing on that kind of energetic ancestral bias.
Perhaps. And in a way, I was telling a friend of mine at the time, I'm like, this is, what I was being labeled as. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not accurate is the only thing. And my friend, she's like, I'd be proud. I'm like, well, I am proud. It makes me sound super cool. Like, I sound really cool if you label me that way, but it's just not accurate. So yes, I thought that there seems to be this kind of mentality kind of linking it that way.
Okay, so getting beyond all of that, what is the reality? Like, if a person wanted to pick a deck because they love the art or it felt it calling to them, how would they DIY teaching themselves tarot?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways. How about I tell you how I did it?
That works.
I'll walk you through my journey because I have had cards for a long time, and it still took me a long time before I felt like...
I've talked to a lot of people. It seems like you need to have the cards like live in your space for a while.
Yes.
Before you pick them up. And then once you start using them, then they sort of multiply like rabbits. All of a sudden it's like...
They grow. That's exactly what happened.
I had one deck for like 3 years. And then I picked up 2 more decks. And then 6 months later, I have 15 decks.
And now I don't even know how many decks I have. But
exactly. Like
yeah.
they just... They multiply.
They do. They definitely do. So the first deck that I ever received or had in my possession is actually, to this day, one of the most complicated tarot decks that I have. And I think was a little bit of a hurdle at first. But the reason why I was drawn to it is because it was Egyptian based. And so...
Ooh, was this the Aleister Crowley deck?
No.
Okay.
No, this is my one that is like...
Which is known as the Golden Dawn for anybody who's taking notes.
No, this is... I've not seen this. I have not seen it around.
I think it's Golden Dawn adjacent.
Maybe.
But we can check.
Yeah, we'll check. I'm not 100% certain, so I don't want to go on the record about that right now. But each of the cards has not only the symbolism, there's no colors, which actually takes out an element of what you read when you're doing readings.
A huge element.
Yeah, so there's no color. And then you also have multiple astrology signs that are and symbols that are on there as well.
Okay, which probably weren't in the original decks because, again, those symbols were seen as being dangerous and witchcrafty.
Yeah, this is, I'm going to go so far as to say just non-traditional, only in that the traditional deck that most people are familiar with is the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, which is a good basis to start with. Mm-hmm. And that's what I eventually ended up really kind of diving in deep and really starting to understand how tarot works.
And for anybody who's really interested, you can get a coloring book of the Rider-Waite cards so you can study them and get the detailed explanation and then color them all in so that you really remember what it all means.
Also, could be stress relieving for all those people who really like to just color things.
Very true.
Adult coloring books.
I think I started on the Fool card and just never even finished him. I painted the dog.
You're like, and we're done. So I had this deck for the longest time, and it came with its own book that then gave like the definition of multiple ways of looking at this, like the biblical connection as well as the Kabbalah connection. There's so many different elements, and then there's like a spiritual way of looking at it, and then there's just so many. Like one card takes like 3 pages.
And there's also, dear listener, if you don't know, 3 different kinds of Kabbalah. There's Kabbalah with a K, which is Jewish mysticism.
And that's what was in this book. Mm-hmm.
There's Kabbalah with a Q, which is sort of magical, alchemical. Mm-hmm. And then there's Kabbalah with a C, which was sort of synthesized by a Frenchman, I want to say in the 1600s.
Yeah. So it does in the book have an alchemical thing, but it actually just says alchemical is like it addressing that portion of it. So I hope that I'm painting the picture. This is actually a fairly complicated deck.
Lots and lots of symbols.
Especially for your first deck. And I'm trying to remember how old I was. I was about 16 years old when I got this deck, and I really wanted to kind of get into it, but I was having a hard time wrapping my mind around it, which was a bit of a hurdle. And so that was one that I had for the longest time as like the single.
And just so y'all know, she was dancing a lot at that age, lots and lots of rehearsals and practices. So
yeah, that's where all my time was.
Not just tons of hours to while away looking at little cards.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I did not get my next deck till I was in my 20s. I'm trying to remember how old I was exactly, and I went kind of the opposite direction and went to a super simplified deck that then was missing a lot of symbolic elements that are really important and lend themselves to, right? So I went from one extreme to the other, and I was really relying whenever I would try to do a little reading for myself of really holding true to what that book that came with it, of what this card means and these different things, and which I felt so restricted and really frustrated because I was like, well, that doesn't really apply to my question, but I'm sure that there's an interpretation that I cannot, like if I could understand really what this card meant, that I could figure it out.
Okay.
Right? And I just was so frustrated by really relying on it so much, of just the boundaries that this particular book gave me. And the boundaries also of the kind of layout of reading, of like, that's how you place the cards for the kind of reading that you're trying to do.
Remember, y'all, she's a Virgo. If that's the directions, she will follow the directions.
Exactly how you tell me how to do them. So I was trying to figure out why I'm not understanding this and not being able to like commit this to memory. Then I received an Oracle deck, which my next one was my Archangel Michael deck, which I love and I still use to this day. It's great. So it wasn't until I started into all of that I really then, how old was I? I was in my mid to late 30s. Now you all are starting to gauge how old I am. When I started...
And hot and single, just saying.
Thanks, Suzanne. At least at the time of this reading. Well, or not reading. It's time of this show. I don't know. Recording. There you go.
Although, to be fair, when we do Patreon, which I think is going to be coming up in season 2, we are going to do a reading per episode.
Okay. All right. News to me, but I'll do it.
We had this conversation, but there might have been wine involved.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. So then as I was really starting to trying to figure out, I'm like, okay, maybe I just need to go with a traditional deck here and go from there. So then that's when I purchased a Rider-Waite deck. And then I started watching other readers do tarot card readings. So I started to watch multiple YouTube tarot readers, and which was really great because I started to kind of get a feel of all the different ways that you can do readings, and also get a feel for different readers and like whether or not I liked their vibe in general, like how they're doing it, what kinds of readings or directions that you can personally take it, and where there's a lot of overlap in the interpretations of people that you can tell they're super well versed.
And when you started doing this, did you have an idea, oh, I'm going to do this professionally at some point, or you were just trying to be really accurate for yourself?
No, I just try to be really accurate for myself.
Hashtag Virgo.
Yeah, like I just wanted to know. Again, I don't want it to be a mystery. I'm trying to figure this out. And so then I started to kind of see, because I wanted to fully understand it. And so, yes, I started to see the traditional ways, that way, starting to commit to memory. And also keep in mind, I was then every single day doing a reading for myself and trying to interpret that. So I was watching all these other people. Like I'd come home from work and then spend the rest of my evening watching multiple tarot readings throughout the evening until it's time for me to go to bed. And then when it was time for me to go to bed, I would then sit there and pull my own cards and then try to see how much of the symbolism I could recall. And then beyond that, and then like read a book, look it up to check how well I was kind of doing with that.
And out there in listener land, if you are listening to this and being like, I'd like to read my own tarot cards, but that just sounds so much. I will say that I did the other way, which is I got some cards, I read a couple of the books, and I just ask for guidance, ask what my question is, which is usually like, what is the next thing I need to do, or what is the next thing I need to know? And for me, it will oftentimes be some kind of keyword that is in the description. So I do use the books. I haven't committed things to memory, but it is amazing how frequently I get the same cards.
Yes, no, absolutely. I will say that more and more I started to see that the consistency in the kinds of cards being pulled for the different questions that I was asking. And then I also, there's so many different ways that you can do this. So yes, me in my meticulousness was really hunkering down and wanting to grab onto something of like, if I follow these rules, this is how this works. And instead, what I really was trying to figure out was, okay, where is there some give? Where is there leeway? And really trying to understand it that way. And I think it was an epiphany for me that I started to see it's not the cards that are telling me. Then that's when I started to see it's my intuition. It started really becoming
mirrors.
Yeah, an understanding of that. Really, I can lay the cards however I want. Honestly, there are a number of traditional layouts that you can do, and if you find those to be helpful, you can do that. I do still sometimes use traditional spreads depending on the kind of question being asked, because it's already all lined out what position means what, and that's the information that I need to know. So great, we'll just go with that. Or I have my own spreads that I do on my own. Like I said, I layer in at least 4 decks that I use in a single reading.
Same.
So I do that. Then I add in my own interpretation. So now that I've committed the traditional meeting between all of these different cards, and also have heard a number of different ways in which these cards can be interpreted based upon, but I also was starting to see that the most important thing was looking at the symbolism in the card and then seeing what specifically stood out to you. Because every single time that you're looking at the card, there's so many different symbolic things in one little card that you may not necessarily see one aspect of it ever. And then all of a sudden your eye goes directly to that thing. You're like, that's interesting. And then you start to see it and understand it in a whole new way. So I think that's another interesting part, that you start to explore the energy of all these different cards and their potential meanings more and more as you do more readings.
For me, I feel like sometimes and this is obvious from my personality, walking through a story that is made of those colors and those shapes. The cards I have are all, I don't have any cards. Well, I take that back. I do have the one Citadel deck, which I love, which is very graphic, but black and white only with gold. But everything else is extremely colorful. But I feel like I step into, for me, things are always hallways, a hallway of this, and am walking through and seeing the story, the order that the cards are in, and that kind of thing, and giving myself the story that I need in order to take the next step or answer my question or what have you. And so that is another way that you can do it if you were kind of like, I'm not about the rules, or the rules are too much, or whatever, because really it's just a conversation with you and the divine, your intuition, all of that kind of thing.
Yes, no, absolutely. I have learned to, again, put protection and boundaries on who it is that I'm communicating with, but I'm also understanding now that it really is more about that conversation that I am interpreting. And so it has helped me develop my intuition more and more, to the point that now often actually, when I'm giving a reading, I will start to give information about things that I didn't even know about. Like,
right, you're so tapped in.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, I never knew that. That's cool. But also to listen to those things that seem like it's totally outside the realm of what is being given in front of you, to mention those things. And it's like you're taking a bit of a risk in saying, at least that's how it feels. But as you're doing that, if I'm doing a reading for somebody else and that's what comes through, so far 100% of the time,
it's meant something to them.
It has meant something to them. They're like, how did you know that? I'm like, I have no idea. It literally is it came to me, so this is what I am saying. So more and more I've used it essentially as a tool to increase my intuition. So not so much that I'm relying as the cards. The cards are just the tool and the vehicle, which I think is an interesting thing that I ended up learning over time in learning how to read tarot overall. But funny enough, to come full circle on the very first deck that I ever received, when I went to Egypt, I was like, okay, I have to pack light because international travel is really restricted.
And bless her heart, she went during COVID, so she saw everything through a mask.
Oh, yeah, all through the mask, and I had to be all things. So I brought one Oracle deck, I think, and I don't even think I brought an Oracle deck. I just brought one tarot deck, and it was that one, because it's like, this one, I'm like...
The Egypt ones.
Yeah, I'm bringing you home so that you can be charged here, and so I can connect with you. And the thing is that you start to form a bond with these cards as you have them.
This is so true. I had a friend who I had forwarded her a link to an artist who was doing his own deck, and they were going to be way out of my budget. I thought at the time. And so she got them and used them like once or twice and then loaned them to me for about 4 months. And I used those cards almost every day, and we became such good friends. And so, you know, the day before she came to retrieve them, we had like a whole like, thank you so much for all you've taught me, and I'm going to miss seeing your pretty faces. And it was a phenomenal deck. But yeah, it was a relationship.
It really is. It is a relationship. And so I have a different relationship with each one of the decks of cards that I have, which is partially why I have so many.
True.
You could ask, why you would need so many cards outside the fact, like, if I use 4 decks, shouldn't I only need 4 then? You're like, yeah. But between all of them, they have kind of personalities, and the kind of information that each of them gives is different. I find, like the Egyptian deck, I still don't use that often, but I use them for very specific things. And I still feel like there's information that I'm missing just yet, because it just seemed like that was such an advanced deck on so many levels that it's like I bought the deck that I needed to work toward.
It will be your I have arrived deck.
Yeah, it's like I finally totally understand, but I don't even know that you ever fully will know the full extent.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's when you're dead.
True.
Which seems appropriate, but sort of downer place to end.
Sorry about that.
I think it was me. But anyway, so, dear listener, go find the Oracle deck that speaks to you and put it in your house and start sort of getting to know it. Next episode is going to be a little bit unusual. It's going to be a payoff for those of you who've been listening since the beginning, because we are going to do the untold stories, the bits and pieces that we have remembered that we forgot when we were in the episode.
Yeah. Or other things that we think are probably relevant that maybe we've alluded to.
So yes, it will be you for untold stories. See you next time.
All the woo, A to Z.